When I heard my mom screaming, I assumed that our neighbor's cat was chewing up Mom's precious garden again. However, when I left my room, I didn't understand anything I was witnessing. My mom was on the verge of collapsing, and I could barely keep it together. At first, I thought that I was seeing a ghost, but what I saw turned out to be very real. Standing on our porch was my sister, who had been missing for the last 5 years. Lily was 2 back then. She went out with my dad, but he returned without her, saying that she had been kidnapped. He left her alone in the car for just a couple of minutes while he went to buy her some candy, but when he returned, she wasn't there. And today, here she is, standing right in front of us. She simply disappeared, and after a year of searching without finding any leads, her file was closed. Some people said that she must have died, whereas others thought that what happened to her may have been a lot worse. My mom blamed my dad for her disappearance and could no longer stand living with him. So they separated. During that time, my dad couldn't care less. He married another woman, and they moved into a big, lavish house. We didn't even know that he had enough money to buy something so luxurious. After this, my mom really started going downhill. Her sadness over my sister never left her. A lot of times, she'd even call me by my sister's name. It was such a horrible time, and I was being torn apart seeing my mom like this. Lately, my mom had been acting even more strangely. She started following the news every day. She even took out my sister's photos from the old albums and hung them up around the house, in the living room, the kitchen, her bedroom, and even mine. She kept on telling me that she felt that my sister was going to return, and that one day the news was going to mention my sister's return. My mom was on the verge of going crazy. She no longer went to work, and she didn't allow me to leave the house, not even to go to school. She ignored all the calls she received and locked all the windows and doors, all because she heard a story on the news about a gang that had been arrested for kidnapping kids for ransom. But I wasn't even a child anymore, and it's not like we owned anything that might tempt the gang. Hope returned to her once again after she read some stories about families that were reunited with their children after they'd been missing for a year. But come on, my sister had been missing for 5 years. We had to accept the reality of it all and move on. But it didn't stop there. My mom's fear of me being kidnapped was killing me. I was no longer allowed to go outside because she feared that the same fate would happen to me. I totally understood where she was coming from, but I couldn't take it any longer. I wanted to live my life like other kids my age. Was I asking for too much? Once, my friend Leah threw a party and she invited all of our friends. I wanted to go to this party more than anything else in the world. I begged my mom over and over to allow me to go, but she refused. So for the first time ever, I snuck out. I told my mom that I was going to sleep, and then I put pillows on the bed. I covered them with my duvet so it would look like I was lying under there. This way my mom would think that I was fast asleep. I was sure that my plan would work out the way I wanted. At the party, I felt anxious at first, but then I quickly relaxed. After exactly an hour, my mom was standing right in front of me. I couldn't believe this woman. She wouldn't even give me space to breathe. She made me leave the party with her. Everyone was looking at us and whispering. I even heard one call my mom a lunatic. All the way home, she kept yelling at me and lecturing me, but I couldn't handle it anymore. I yelled in her face, "Enough! Can't you see that you're keeping me locked up like a prisoner? This is not the life I want for myself. If you want me to stay with you, allow me to live, or else you won't see my face ever again." She didn't reply. She just slammed the door and locked it up as usual, imprisoning me. The following day, I started hearing rumors spreading about me and my mom. The worst one was that I'd run away with a guy who was 30 years older than me because my mom didn't allow me to date him, and that the police returned me home and locked him up because I was still underage. And since then, my mom hadn't allowed me to go anywhere. I mean, can you believe that? It is all Lily's fault. If she didn't disappear that day, my life wouldn't have turned into such a nightmare. You might think it couldn't get any worse, but you'd be wrong. I had nowhere I could run to. I only had my mom, who'd turned crazy, and my dad, who was living with his wife. Me and my dad, well, we didn't exactly have a good relationship. I never saw him except for at Christmas. He usually got me a gift, and we had hot chocolate in some cafe. Then he disappeared until the next Christmas rolled around. I thought maybe if I went to my dad and convinced him to let me stay with him instead of in the prison with my mom, my life would get better. You might think that sounds selfish and ungrateful, but hear me out. I seriously needed his help. I mean, my mom wasn't a normal person anymore. I decided she needed actual medical help. She was losing it. The next day, I snuck out of the window. The window was quite high up, and I never really thought it through. I hurt my leg when I jumped, but at least I was still able to walk. It was pitch black outside. My dad's house was only 3 blocks away, so I decided to walk there, even though I was scared. It was the first time that I'd ever walked alone at night. I kept imagining a car stopping and kidnapping me. Okay, I know what you're thinking now. All those ideas had been put there by my mom, and well, look what she'd done. It had worked. I was officially terrified. Though when I arrived, I wish I hadn't even come. I wasn't welcomed at all. My stepmom kept me on the porch and didn't even let me into the house. I sat shivering in the cold for more than an hour, waiting for my dad to arrive. When he finally did, I thought that he'd at least ask me why I'd come here. But what he did made me hate his guts. He started shouting in my face, telling me he didn't need any more problems and that he didn't want the police entering his house thinking he was a suspect. A suspect? But why? I'm his daughter. It wasn't like he'd kidnapped me or anything. But when he tried to take me home, the police surrounded his house, handcuffed him, and took him away. That night was one of the longest nights of my life.
into dozens of pieces. She threw it because she was annoyed at her mom for not letting her go to a party that night. Me? I was pretty quiet most of the time. I kept to myself, and I always tried to stay out of Jessica's way. We had to share a bedroom between us, and of course, she got the whole bed to herself. She forced me to sleep on the floor, on the tiniest bit of blanket. I would complain to my parents, telling them how unfair it was, but they couldn't do anything. I think they were scared of Jessica. She was bigger than them, even as a teen, and she could hurt them if she wanted to. Jessica was basically the boss of the house. There was another time when I accidentally spilled soda on Jessica. I was in the kitchen with the drink in hand when Jessica burst in and barreled straight into me. The cup of soda went flying and landed right on top of Jessica. I was petrified. When I looked into her eyes, I saw pure fury. I swear I saw a glint of red pass through her eyes. She chased me around, both of us screaming, with me in terror, her with rage, until she grabbed me and slapped me in the face. I started crying and my parents came in asking what happened. Jessica eyed me from the corner of her eye with a clear message. You tell them what happened and you're dead. I shook my head at my parents, saying I tripped and fell. They believed me, but Jessica still gave me a dangerous look afterwards. My sister was horrid. I really think those were some of the worst years of my life. Every day was a nightmare, trying to survive around Jessica's hot temper. My parents were kind, but they were weak around Jessica, and she got whatever she wanted. Well, at least whatever we could afford. But then something changed. Gradually at first, before everything in my life literally flipped on its head. We started getting better groceries. My mom would come home, sometimes even smiling, and her bags would be full of fresh vegetables and meat and fish and healthy snacks. She even bought herself and Dad a bottle of this really classy wine. I was so confused. Neither of my parents had gotten a new job. How could they afford all this expensive stuff? But I didn't think much of it. I was just glad for the better, tastier food. A few weeks after that, my parents bought a new car. It was a sleek red Honda with 6 seats and TV screens inside. I couldn't believe it. This must have cost a huge fortune. Where was all this money coming from? One time I asked my mom about it, but she just laughed it off, saying we had the money, so I didn't need to worry about it. But I was still confused. Jessica loved the change in lifestyle. She loved the money we seemed to suddenly have out of thin air. My parents would buy her new clothes, jewelry, and makeup. I got some new toys and clothes, and I even got a gaming console. It was incredible. I stopped asking my mom about the money. If she said we were fine, then we were fine. But then one morning I woke up, and at the breakfast table, one seat was missing. Jessica hadn't gotten out of bed. My parents started eating without saying a word. Had they not noticed Jessica wasn't up yet? It would be rude to start eating. But then they ate anyway. And being terrified of Jessica as I was, I didn't say anything either. Then it came around to noon, and Jessica still wasn't up. I had stayed away from our bedrooms, as sometimes Jessica would get moody if I woke her up. It was the weekend, so it was completely understandable that she would sleep in. But when hours fell away and my parents started cooking dinner, I was starting to get concerned. Where's Jessica? I asked my parents. They looked at each other, giving an odd look. Then my mom spoke. Don't worry about her. She's fine. Is she sick? I asked, worried. My dad shook his head, chuckling. No, she's not sick. I looked at them both perplexedly. What happened? Don't worry, Mom hushed. Just eat your dinner. I was used to obeying and staying quiet, so I did just that. I ate my dinner, steak with fries, and went to bed. As I slowly opened my door, I was expecting to see Jessica's sleeping figure in the bed, but she wasn't there. It was completely empty. I gasped, running straight into my parents in a panic. Jessica's gone, I cried. My mom looked at me, seemingly unfazed. Jessica's just going to spend some time away for a bit. But don't you worry. I looked at Dad in urgency. What? Where's Jessica? She's in a better place. My eyes widened at the words, but he patted my arm consolingly. Oh, not like that, he said. Jessica is fine. It's just she is going to be away for a few days. But you should be happy. You have the whole room to yourself. I nodded slowly. But where is she? Mom frowned. Stop with all these questions. Go to bed. But I started until my dad cut me off. Listen to your mother, he said. I looked down defeated and trudged over to my bedroom. The bed was still empty. I could sleep in it tonight. I crawled into the covers. It was so comfy. Maybe I could get used to Jessica being away for a while. That night, I had the best sleep of my life. My parents said Jessica would be gone for a few days. But then the first week went by, with still no Jessica. Then a couple of weeks. Then a month. I hated to admit it, but I missed Jessica. I asked my parents again where Jessica was, but they just told me to be quiet. And meanwhile, more and more money seemed to be pouring in. We got a new TV. We got new kitchen appliances. I saw my mother walking around with a diamond necklace. My dad had a Rolex watch. I even got a new phone, the latest edition. And yet there was no Jessica. I started to get suspicious. When is Jessica coming back? I demanded. My parents would just look at me blankly and tell me to stop asking questions. I felt like I was the only sane one in the family. They acted like Jessica's absence was nothing, like she wasn't even their daughter or my sister. I had no clue what was going on. But then one day, as I was looking for my phone in my parents' bedroom, I found something that changed my life forever. A letter addressed to my parents was hidden under their bed. I opened it up and gasped as I read each line. It went like this. Dear Mr. and Mrs. Anderson, thank you for your cooperation. We will take good care of Jessica. It was a wise choice to send her to us. You need not worry about her. She'll be just fine. I also advise you to tell your other daughter nothing of this. It's for the best. And congratulations on the money. I hope you enjoy it. Sincerely, Stephen Smith. I was shocked. I was literally paralyzed. I couldn't comprehend what I had just read. What did it mean? Where was Jessica? Who was Stephen Smith? I didn't know what to think. But then my mind started to click into place. The money. The sudden buying of expensive things. Where had it come from? I knew my parents still had low-paying jobs. The money didn't fall from the sky. It had to come from somewhere. And I had a feeling it had something to do with Jessica and this letter. I kept looking under the bed, looking at small pieces of paper. All I found were a bunch of receipts and small letters from other random people. But then I found something. An envelope hidden at the bottom of the pile. It was yellow and had fancy writing scrawled on it. I opened it up and pulled out the card inside. On it read a check for $1 million, addressed to my parents, funded by Stephen Smith. That's when it hit me. They sold her. They sold Jessica for the money. Jessica was always mean to them, and she always behaved badly. They probably would have been glad to sell her off. I didn't really know much about selling children, but they probably sold her off for child labor or something, where she would spend her days working tirelessly away. How could they do something like that? Sure, Jessica could be difficult at times, but that didn't mean they had the right to sell her. While I was still trying to process this unbelievable realization, I heard the door open up behind me, and standing in the doorframe, silhouetted by the outside light, were my parents. They looked at me in shock, at the letters in my hand, and at the $1 million check. A dark look cast over their face. I felt fear strike me, but I immediately jumped up. You sold Jessica! I screamed at them. What is wrong with you? They didn't say anything. They just rushed toward me and yanked the pieces of paper from my grasp. I backed away terrified. They looked at the $1 million check, eyes hungry. Is it okay? I heard Mom whisper. Yes, she didn't rip it. My dad replied. I couldn't believe it. They cared more about this stupid check than their own daughter? You're horrid, horrid people! I yelled at them. You sold Jessica just for a stupid check. I hate you! They looked up at me, shocked at the anger in my eyes, and stepped slowly towards me. Darling, it's not like that, said Mom. Oh, what? You traded her or something? I cried. That's still no excuse. We didn't sell Jessica, honey, said my dad quietly. We sent her. I interrupted him. Yeah, to Stephen Smith. I know all about it. You sold Jessica into labor or something. Then, to my horror, my parents started laughing. I shrank back in repulsion. How dare you laugh at something like this? I accused. My mom wiped tears of laughter from her eyes. Oh, darling, that's not at all what happened. I frowned. Well, if that's not what happened, then where's Jessica? My parents looked at each other, then nodded. They explained it all to me. A few months back, they entered this lottery competition, which was funded by this billionaire, Stephen Smith. He was hoping to give back to the poor community, and he offered a free lottery to those who could hardly afford to live. They entered the lottery never believing they would win, but they just had to try it out. And to their joyous surprise, they won. But Stephen Smith told them it had to be kept secret, because other people in the neighborhood might get jealous. They won the $1 million, and life was great. But Jessica was still mean and undisciplined. They feared she would grow up into this selfish, rude person, and that's when Stephen Smith offered to take Jessica from them. Not to a labor factory, but to a rehabilitation camp. She would be treated by professionals to learn discipline, and to treat others with more respect. She was going to be there for a year. It was Stephen Smith's own project, but it was very expensive. But since my parents had $1 million, they could afford it, and they sent Jessica there for her own good. But I was still confused. Why didn't you tell me this before? I asked. My mom sighed. Stephen Smith told us it was for the better not to tell you. You might feel scared or worried, and we didn't want to put that kind of pressure on you. But I see now that it was the wrong choice. We should have told you ages ago. We're sorry, said Dad. I nodded, burst out crying, and we all hugged. When will we see Jessica? I asked. We can visit her tomorrow if you want. The next day, we drove for a few hours until we arrived at the rehabilitation camp. As soon as we got there, Jessica came running towards us, and she crushed us with a huge embrace. I was shocked. Jessica had never hugged me before. I missed you, cried Jessica. My parents sighed in relief, and so did I. I missed Jessica too.
Hi, I'm Kara, and I have a confession to make. This is very hard for me to talk about. You see, I did a terrible thing. Something that almost cost the life of the person I care about the most. My 5-year-old sister disappeared because of me. I beg you not to judge me before you listen to the whole story, though, because it's really not that simple. Let me explain things from the start. My little sister Lana is the only person I have in this world. You might wonder why. Well, the rest of my family is gone. We used to have the most amazing mother, but she passed away. Yeah, that's right. 5 years ago, we lost our mother after Lana was born. Her surgical delivery of Lana had a lot of complications. Because of a stupid medical error that put her in a coma, and 2 weeks later, death stole her from us. Ever since then, it was just the 3 of us, Lana, my father, and I. You'd think that after a mom's death, my dad would have taken it upon himself to take care of us. However, my dad is not that type of father. I don't know if I even considered him to be much of a father in the first place. He usually spent most of his time at work and expected Mom to do the rest, such as cooking, cleaning, taking care of the kids. He believed that raising kids wasn't a man's job. So, after a tragedy, he had no clue how to raise us. But instead of actually making an effort to try, he married another woman who became our stepmother. Apparently, replacing Mom with another woman after 2 years seemed like a great idea to him. My little sister, of course, didn't really get what was happening, so she stayed out of it. I, on the other hand, was having a hard time accepting the reality my father had forced upon us. Even though I tried my best to communicate with him, every conversation we had ended in a big fight. I honestly couldn't deal with him. He was a hopeless case. As for the woman he brought into our home, she was even worse than him. The woman was pure evil, just like the typical stepmom in the stories we grew up listening to. She acted like the nicest person in front of our dad. And when he was gone, she was a completely different person. She screamed at us, called us names, told us how worthless we were, and the list went on. I never took anything she said seriously because her opinion never mattered to me. However, I got really aggressive when she went for my little sister. My little sister was so innocent and gentle. She reminded me of my mother a lot. She had a pure heart and every mean word affected her. Seeing her cry was the thing that hurt me the most in the world. That is why I defended my sister and tried my best to keep our stepmom away from her. But when I couldn't prevent it, I was there to make her feel better. What seemed to cheer her up the most were the stories I told her about her mother. Lana was always curious to know what Mom was like. I tried my best to describe her, and I showed her old pictures and videos of our mother. She looked just like Lana. With time, these stories became Lana's favorite topic to talk about. It reminded her that no matter what happened, Mom was watching over us. I also told her stories of how one day we would be okay, because we would run off together to the city and do whatever we wanted. I promised her that we'd run off to Disneyland together, and her big eyes sparkled like diamonds. I showed her Disneyland pictures and videos, and I asked her to close her eyes and imagine us there. Little things like these were the only tool I had to cheer up my sister. Seeing her fall asleep with a smile on her face meant the world to me. After I made sure she was asleep, I would hug her and cry silently all night, holding my breath so I wouldn't wake her up. In the mornings, I would always prepare her breakfast, make sure she ate, and walk her to school before I headed to mine. Even though my sister was only 5 years old, she was pretty smart. She kept a smile on her face because she knew that it upset me to see her sad. Deep down, I knew she wasn't happy. Lana deserved a much better life than this. One day, I had to stay late at school. I was trying to finish a project and time flew by. I hated arriving home late because I worried about Lana being alone with my wicked stepmother. And my concerns were legitimate because as soon as I opened the door, I could hear my stepmother yelling at my sister. I stormed into the kitchen and I saw Lana cleaning broken glass off the floor. What the heck? My stepmother noticed my presence, so she quickly began excusing this insanity. She declared, "Your dumb sister dropped her plate and she's cleaning up her mistake." "You monster!" I screamed. "How could you ask a child to clean up broken glass?" I wanted to kill her. I was fuming inside. I imagined myself dragging her by the hair and kicking her out of our house. I was so angry, I even forgot my little sister was there as I was screaming. And before I knew it, I had grabbed a couple of plates from the table and I smashed them on the floor and said, "No, you clean up after your mistake." I looked to my right and Lana was standing in the corner frightened. My eyes filled with tears when I saw how terrified she was. I would have died 1,000 times before scaring my sister like that. I don't know what had come over me. I grabbed her hand and took her upstairs to our room. Lana was shaking and I was too. This time, I couldn't hold back my tears and wait for her to fall asleep. Instead, I hugged her while crying uncontrollably. Lana held me tight and promised she would fix everything. When Dad came upstairs, I refused to come out of my room, and he was raging. Lana kept asking him to kindly leave me alone, but he wouldn't listen. He continued knocking hard on my door and pushing the handle with all his strength until he cracked the door open. He stormed in aggressively, and even though I was used to it by now, I still felt scared. My little sister hurried to protect me. She knew what was coming next. She cried, "Daddy, no, please," but he ignored her shouts and he went ahead and slapped me really hard. 1, 2, 3 times. My face turned red and swollen, and I tried to hold back my tears. He demanded that I apologize to my stepmother. I yelled, "No way! I would never apologize!" I could take the beating as long as I didn't have to apologize to that evil snake. I closed my eyes expecting another hit, but it never came. When I opened them, Lana was clutching onto his arm with all her strength and crying, "Please, Daddy." He eventually decided to stop and he left the room. I crawled into my bed sobbing. Lana lay beside me. She looked at me with her big eyes, clueless about how to calm me down. But when I relaxed a bit, Lana began telling me tales of how we would run away someday to Disneyland, followed with stories about our mother and the way she watches over us. She was trying to take care of me the way I took care of her. I smiled and held her, and we fell asleep. I woke up the next day feeling sore. I turned over to see Lana, but she wasn't sleeping next to me. I went out of the room to check up on her, but she was nowhere to be found. I started panicking. Where could she be? I stormed into the room I hated the most, and I asked my dad and stepmother where Lana was. They were half asleep and seemed like they couldn't care less, so I kept yelling until I caught their attention. Soon enough, they started looking for her, but to no avail. My dad called the police and reported her missing. Shortly after, the police came to our house. When they questioned us, I couldn't tell them we lived in an abusive house because I didn't want my sister and me to be sent into the broken system of foster care. However, I needed them to find her, so I informed them that I thought my sister might have tried to run off to Disneyland because we had planned it in our imaginations. The police search took place shortly after. I felt so guilty. My sister had gone missing because I had glorified the idea of running away. So she must have thought it was a better alternative to staying in our abusive home. My attempts of trying to protect her ended up hurting her. I rushed out of the house to look for her. After hours of searching, I felt like I was about to collapse. When I found myself 5 minutes away from the graveyard my mom is buried in, I went there because all I needed at that moment was to talk to my mom. I sat next to her grave. I was sobbing. I told my mom that Lana was missing and I needed her help even though I knew she couldn't really help. I mean, my mom was dead. Right at that moment, I felt like I'd lost all hope, but suddenly, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a little girl sitting next to a grave, not that far from where I was sitting. I looked closer. Hang on, was that Lana? I got up and started running towards her. Oh my, yes, it was Lana. She ran toward me, and before I knew it, she was in my arms. It's impossible to put into words how I felt at that moment. What are you doing here, silly? I asked her. She then pointed at a grave that seemed to have a similar name to Mom's and said, I'm visiting Mommy. I smiled. I totally forgot my sister was still learning how to read. This is not Mom's grave, I told her. I took her hand and showed her where our mom was. Lana let go of my hand and sat beside the grave as she started talking to my mother. The sight was just heartbreaking, and her words broke my heart even more. She began saying that she came all the way from home to ask Mom to watch over me, better this time because I've been hurting. I guess that my little sister truly believed that our mom could protect us, and maybe she was right. In a way, I felt like Mom helped me find Lana after she went missing. After all, we reunited at the place where she rests, and this made me realize we'll always be safe and happy together. How would you describe your relationship with your sister? Tell us more in the comments section below and post your thoughts about this story. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel.